Well, a lot of us have come back from our summer holidays, politicians included. So was there a summer reset for Labor? Let's bring in my Sky News colleague, former Labor Minister Graham Richardson. Thanks for your time. I don't know if these holidays seem to get shorter, or maybe I'm reading the newspaper too much when I'm on holiday. Richo, what have you made of the reset? Has anything happened here? Have people had a bit of a break? Or did Peter Dutton manage to sort of introduce politics into the year early so people would be talking about it and get annoyed by it?
Well, I think Peter Dutton has done a pretty reasonable job, given that he's the leader of a party that's not going to be in government for quite a while, with Albo having a big majority and being very popular. I think Dutton's done pretty well in a very difficult circumstance.
Yeah, I guess they're a long way from power, the Liberal Party, albeit it's not a big majority from Labor, it's a big lead in seats, so I get your point there. What did you make, though, because you've got to be careful as opposition leader, pick your targets, pick your times to have a crack, about the boycott Woolworths line from Peter Dutton over not selling Australia Day merchandise? I mean, a lot of this stuff strikes me as it's almost like a pre-landfill shelf, isn't it? You buy it knowing it's going in the dump in about 5 days, the dodgy rubber thongs or whatever they might be.
Yeah, I think, this is the classic storm in a teacup. I think it matters very little to most Australians, but it gets a headline. And when you're a mid-term opposition leader who's a long way behind in the number of seats in the parliament, then that sort of thing is gold, really, and you run with it as hard as you can.
We've got the start of the year with another overseas trip, not by Anthony Albanese. Now, a lot of these trips leaders have to go on. Perhaps there was one he could have skipped last year, the one to the US. You'd have to be turning down the US invitation. But is this going to be a real intent from Anthony Albanese, maybe to avoid the travel, particularly at the start of the year, and instead to be talking up cost of living?
Yeah, well, I don't think that Anthony needs to race overseas too often at the moment. I think you've always got to be wary. Dutton never stops working. He works hard, and you don't want him to be gaining any ground. So you've got to cut off his oxygen as much as you can. And one of the ways of doing that is just staying home. So I think Albo ought to have a look at that for this year. I mean, he's had a fair bit of time away. Now, you have to if you're the leader of Australia. Doesn't matter which party you're from. You've got no choice as a trading nation but to visit those with whom you trade.
Yeah, exactly. I guess the reality is we're a long way from anywhere. You've just got to manage the perception side of things. I remember Julia Gillard's approval rating always used to soar when she went overseas, and that was sort of used against her in the end. What about when we go to cost of living, supermarkets, this inquiry that was launched? Interesting to read from the ACCC's Rod Sims. He says, look, this is just a bit of a pointless inquiry. You've got to actually tackle the duopoly and mention just how big Coles and Woolworths are compared to the rest of the world. But unless you're willing to do something about that, don't just have another announceable. Is Labor in sort of danger of being perceived as a government with a lot of reviews?
Yeah, I think it is in danger of that. I mean, the idea that in some way you're going to stop Coles or Woolies is nonsense. It won't happen. Doesn't matter who's in power, doesn't matter who has an inquiry, that will not happen. So what we've got to do is learn to live with it and try and shape it as best we can to serve our country well.